Mario and I have a very complicated history. His 3D outings are some of my favorite games of all time. I can play any installment of Mario Kart for hours and not get bored, and Mario Dance Dance Revolution was a game I also played. However, when it comes to the 2D games, I never got a chance to really play all of them. And the ones I did play, I didn't get far enough to gauge how much I like that side of the franchise. But now with the release of Mario Wonder, it's about damn time I have a thorough look at the most notorious game series of all time. And there is a bunch of them, so let's see how I feel by the end of it. So that was a bad idea. I had a very strange feeling when I first started this game. Like, it is the first official video game of all time. So did I have any right to review it? Saying anything negative or comparing it to another game would be a little bit of a disservice to it, since it is the first of its kind. So I first went into this game incredibly open-minded and not wanting to critique it, and instead immerse myself in what's essentially video game history. And seeing that iconic first level immediately gave me a sense of appreciation and a bit of nostalgia. Although I've never actually played this game myself, I've seen it around constantly, being referenced in other Mario games, the movie, and just media in general, making it feel like it wasn't actually a typical Mario level and like a relic of some sort, known by all and seen by all, but you would never be able to touch it yourself. But now I am, through Nintendo Switch Online. And luckily, that historic feel did not go away. As someone who's played his fair share of the 2D platformer genre, I was pleasantly surprised at how well this game has aged. Sure, it did take a little bit of time to get used to the controls and everything, but after the first level, I was well accustomed to the game. I guess that's in part to how little controls there are to remember, literally only being 3. But in a weird sense, I am quite happy to see the lack of buttons to press, since nowadays, games try to utilize every button in some weird way that I most often mix up. And overall, that simplicity really works in the game's favor, because if you really boil it down, Super Mario Bros. Is basically just a glorified arcade game. You play level by level, racking up lives, collecting points to the overall counter, and trying to beat the stage. And once you do, you are immediately booted to the next level. And it's a really smart design detail. I'd imagine kids at the time who first played this game felt how arcade-like it was and became well adjusted to it. But now it has a few added twists to make the game more accessible. For me though, it felt nice to see common Mario characters and enemies and how much they changed over the years and how differently levels can function compared to now. Speaking of, the level design is actually not that bad. Some levels had some pretty unique concepts going for them, and I was surprised at the originality I saw even for today's standards. Like the overwater Cheep Cheep level was pretty creative, seeing how Cheep Cheeps normally took the role of water Goombas but now act like jumping fish trying to get in your way. I was also taken aback at all the secrets hidden in this game as well. Again, considering this is their first video game ever, Nintendo did not have to go out of their way to add these different pipes leading into an area of coins or finding the secret warp pipe zones to skip through levels, but they did anyways. For being so old, the game has a unique charm to it that the other Mario games are so well known for, which of course is multiplied with the original Mario songs. Now, I've heard the original music to death already. Who hasn't? It's been remade and remixed endlessly, but listening to it in the actual context of the game it was made for felt different. I don't know why I felt like that, but I felt the same way about the other 2 songs that are in this game. Out of everything from this game, the music has probably aged the best. But what didn't age well was the overall difficulty and the constant rehashing. Now, I would have loved if this game was difficult for the right reasons, like for the levels or enemies. But in actuality, it's because of the ancient mechanics. Not being able to move the screen back is annoying to all hell, because if I miss something, there is no way of going back to it. The fact that you automatically turn to Small Mario even if you have a power-up is infuriating. Jumping does function most of the time, but when it doesn't, you usually just take a nosedive to death. All these issues plagued the game, but again, how much can I really complain? There was gonna be rough edges around for sure, so although I don't love these aspects of the game, I can live with it. But I don't like how the game rehashes levels. In total, there are 32 levels in this game, but if you really boil it down, there's only like 12 to 16. Some levels have very minor differences from one another, and they don't even try to hide it, not to mention how each world basically has the same level layout. Level 1, the introductory grassy field-like area. Level 2 is a cave or water area. Level 3 is a hills or mountain area, except for that one time where there was I think, a snow level, but the substance on the ground was very similar to another white substance. And the final level is a lava castle with the same Bowser fights each and every time. Rinse and repeat 8 times in a row. And I played all of them as well. Didn't do any of that secret warp zone bullshit because I'm too cool for that. And throughout my playthrough, I still kinda enjoyed these levels, but I think it would be way better if the game only had 4 to 5 worlds so we could have more quality over quantity, especially since the later levels get very unoriginal. The final level of the game is kinda cool though. There's all these different sections and you gotta find the right pipe in each area to let you progress, all the while trying to fight against the clock, which is very impressive since I imagine the developers didn't have much to work with but still found a way to make a pretty good climax to the game. And after dealing with Bowser once more, you finally see a very creepy looking Peach. Yeah, honestly, I would have preferred to see another Toad, not gonna lie. My runtime clocked into about 40 minutes and I beat it all in one sitting, so it won't take too much of your time. Despite the jank of it, I see why this game still has countless speedruns to this day, since mastering all the movements and secret exits make this game much shorter than it already is. And I know I had some bad things to say about it, but honestly, the fact that this game is good and is still very playable even though it's so old really says something about the sheer quality of the Mario franchise, since there's a lot of NES games that came after it that are way too janky to even try to control nowadays. Again, it feels very unfair to give this game a ranking, but if I had to, it would be a little over half full on the glass. Moving now to awards. I had one very big question to ask when I first started up Super Mario Bros. 2. The Lost Levels. And it is, was Nintendo justified for thinking this game was too difficult for players in the West? I'm assuming most people already know this, but just in case, when this game first came out in Japan, it was deemed too difficult for American players, so they opt to release a different version here instead, which also makes me question how Nintendo used to belittle American gamers as well, but I digress. Which made me wonder if I already found the first Mario game to be difficult because of the jank and slight BS of it, what would become of this game? Is it hard because of the level design or for the same reasons as before? And after playing it, I can say it's a little bit of both. But before we get into that, how is this game different from the first one? The game introduces a lot of game-changing features compared to before, so bear with me a little bit as I list all of them. Like how every background object now has a pair of eyes on them. And that's it, that's all the changes. So although this game looks virtually the same, Nintendo does add a decent amount of spice to the level design. There's a new stage hazard that has a bunch of leaves blowing in the background. The giant spring went pretty hard. Luigi is in it? Yeah, aside from that, the Lost Levels doesn't really introduce anything. I'll say it again, limited hardware and whatnot, but man, this game really lives up to the Lost Levels epithet, because the biggest way to describe this game is just more levels from its predecessor at a much more difficult pace. And the difficulty part is the biggest thing the game has going for it, because I knew from the very moment I punched that question block, saw an interesting colored mushroom, touched it, and died, that this game pulled no punches. This game is a pure mix of a difficulty spike and a bunch of BS. Like in Mario 1, the game at least tries to hide that it's janky in a couple places here and there, but here, the Lost Levels fucking owns the unfairness with pride. 2-2 is a great example. Here you have Mario on the ground, with a platform astronomically high up, and with no way around, you ask, how do I go up? And so you jump around a bit, try and look for a hidden block or something, and one does appear. But how do you get up there now? It's still pretty far up. There isn't another hidden block to look for. So what you gotta do now is fucking pray. You literally can't jump up there without maximum speed and calculation. And even then, you are still at risk of falling off since Mario can be quite slippery. But not only that, you can't mess up too much because the screen still doesn't allow you to go left. Meaning for this one singular peculiar jump, you must fight against the hidden block, jumping mechanics, and wall mechanics at the same time. And the cherry on top, you are being timed as well, so you can't mess up too much either way. And guys, this is one of many different examples I can give, and the game still runs on that lose all your lives, you die feature, so the Lost Levels tries its utmost hardest to fuck you up. And not gonna lie, all of these factors combined should have made me not want to complete this game. But I did. Was it from raw determination and grit? Not exactly. So the Nintendo Switch Online version of this game has this handy dandy feature of using save states. And since I don't want to go to therapy for playing this game, I may have used it a couple of times here and there. Alright, fine, I abused it. Judge me all you want, because I don't care. I was not prepared to go through hell again. So anyways, I continue to play the game very legitimately with no handicaps at all, and nothing in particular really stood out to me feature-wise. But indirectly, there is something in this game that no other Mario installment has ever done, and that was making you feel like power-ups aren't worth it half the time. Usually, power-ups in any Mario game are essential. They offer you different abilities that you didn't have access to before, and being able to tank more hits is also a plus. No one should ever be able to tell you that they'd rather be Small Mario than anything else. But in this game, in many levels, there are points where being big isn't really optimal, mostly due to small spaces being hard to access than before, and how big of a target you are. So much so that I actually prefer not to get a mushroom or a fire flower because of how limited my movement becomes. But on the flip side, I am in so much more danger of getting hit and dying as Small Mario. And I thought this was a really interesting conundrum that this game will throw at you, and something that gives the edge to the lost levels that no other Mario game has done since. But something that this game does a horrible job at are the castle levels. Not only are they bland, but they have the exact same problem of reusing ideas from the first game, but it's done even worse here. 3-4 is the worst offender of this. It's another choose the path to get to the end level, but here there's literally no visual indicator as to what path is the correct one, and it's a total shot in the dark whether you can get it or not. And the best part about it is that the same formula is repeated 3 different times in this game. And better yet, the boss at the end of the level is still the exact same Bowser from Mario 1. Which is weird, since out of all the things they could have changed in this game to make it harder, you'd think Bowser would be one of them. And after plummeting the 16th Bowser in a row, you meet Creepy Peach yet again, but this time facing forwards. And then they do this horrifying Chaos Emerald-like celebration, and the kingdom is saved once again. Oh, but what's this? A special zone. Actually, this is kinda neat. This was something that wasn't in the original. Let's check it out. Alright, that was fun. Super Mario The Lost Levels is a very okay game. While there's some aspects that outshine the original, I feel like the developer's main purpose when making this game is to find new ways to piss off the player in any way they can, which they succeeded in doing. And while it works for some levels, it can often be very annoying. And without save states, I don't know if I would have been able to beat it. Regardless, I did find both the Lost Levels and the OG very addictive to beat, as I was also able to beat this game in 2 sittings. Taking all that into account, I think the Lost Levels is sitting just below the half-full section of the glass, so it's a little bit worse than its prequel. And as for the answer to my question I first asked in this section, yeah, maybe Nintendo is right to not port over this game. But not because of how hard it is, but because it fucking blows. Now, I was kinda hesitant to if I should cover this game in this video, since on technical terms, it's not a Mario game. It's just a texture pack of Doki Doki Panic with Mario characters. And even though it could have saved me a lot of time not covering it, I decided that I'd only talk about it if it left some sort of landmark on the Mario series. And turns out, yeah, it definitely did. Because even though this isn't supposed to be a Mario game, it resembles one a whole lot, since there's still a lot of jumping, levels, and enemy slaying to do, but it has a totally different progression system. Typically, a Mario level ends with the player continuously going right until they reach the flagpole. But this game doesn't have any of those, and instead feels like each world is continuing from one another, since you endlessly plunge yourself deeper with many doors, openings, and more. Each level never feels linear, and even though there's a set path for you to go on, the game makes it feel like you're playing through one continuous path. The gameplay itself also feels very different, but familiar at the exact same time. I guess Nintendo got pretty lucky that this game feels pretty Mario already with all the jumping you do, but getting used to stepping on enemies and not killing them was very weird, because now jumping onto enemies or platforms are now a means to picking up items, which is the main feature of this game. And while I like the change of pace and find it oddly satisfying to pick up enemies and chuck them around, it feels very poorly developed, since some of those flying objects have a very small platform window, so it can take a couple of attempts to really get a hold of them. Did I eventually get used to it? Kinda, but it still felt a bit clunky compared to how easily it becomes to pick up enemies in later games, making this feature feel even more outdated. Something that I did love though were the enemies from this game, and more specifically at how many of them became staples of the Mario series. Everyone knows how Shy Guys became an enemy mainstay and how Birdo would make her way to joining spin-off games, but I'm surprised that even the more obscure enemies managed to make a comeback. I'm a big fan of Partners in Time, so imagine my surprise when I first saw that Pidgeots originated from this game. It was a total mind blow. It's also crazy to see how much this game would affect the main cast of Mario as well. The game features 4 different playable characters: Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Blue Toad. Mario is the all-around character. Nothing special about him, but nothing really bad about him either. Luigi is the guy who can jump the highest, but you need to be careful with him since he is slippier than the other characters. Peach is pretty OP since she can float around everywhere, but is not as fast as the others. And Blue Toad's special ability is being absolute dog shit. There is no reason to use him ever. Having playable characters was already impressive enough, but the fact is, these things about the characters become defining attributes of who they are. Luigi becomes known for his jumping capability, and most of Peach's moveset from Smash are solely from this game. And there's also the fact that 3D World just straight up copied these characters and slammed them into itself. Mario 2 is super important to the series, more so than the lost levels in my opinion. And this game is also a first for featuring different bosses from just Bowser. And while they're not super memorable except for maybe Warts, I'm just glad to see that we don't get the same thing in every world now. It's what I would say if it wasn't for stupid Birdo. On its own, it's a pretty alright boss, but it gets absolutely ruined by the fact that she appears in every level, and it just turns out to be so repetitive because of how much they utilize her in every chance they get. This is by far my biggest gripe from this game. That doesn't include the obvious poorly aged controls that the NES games were known for. But other than that though, I'd say that this game is a step above the first two. I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought I would, despite being the least Mario out of all the Marios on this list. So I'll hold it to the same standard because of how much it influences different parts of the series. So while it's not amazing in any way, it sits above the halfway mark on the glass. And with that done, let's move on to the number 3. Mario Bros. 3. Just cut to the next one already. Alright guys, starting with this game is when we get to the real shit. Like, we can go and appreciate Mario Bros 1, 2, and other 2 all we want, but it's not until we reach this game that Mario really solidifies himself as that guy in gaming. And this is also when Nintendo really started to further the gap from what it means to be a video game compared to an arcade game. Because almost immediately, you're hit with the biggest difference you can make between them, being the existence of a world map, which to my knowledge was the first of its kind. I mean, apparently you could argue that The Legend of Zelda or Final Fantasy first introduced a world map as a means to get to a level, but when you specifically talk about an overworld in which you can go back and forth in between individual levels and worlds, this game would be the first one, according to some guy from Korra, so it's definitely legit. And the thing is, the world map isn't bland. Despite being the first game to utilize it, the maps have all these interesting twists and turns, like being able to smash rocks to farther places, or taking pipes to a cloud section of the world. And this gap is emphasized even more when you look at the gameplay. The very first thing you realize is that everything feels more alive now. The colors feel more vibrant than ever, the enemies have bits and pieces of personality to them, and the world around you is filled with so many shapes and details, and Mario himself looks super animated. But best of all, you can move to the left now, yeah! And this is just indicative of how much this game is the base of what makes the world of Mario, the world of Mario. Toads have more than one line of dialogue, and there's other quirky characters that are asking to be saved. And overall, this game doesn't feel like a weird blocky dystopia that's slightly off-putting. This is Mario. Oh, and we should also talk about the actual gameplay now. This game was the first in the series to introduce world themes, so you can thank Mario 3 for starting the whole grass world to desert world to water world pipeline. And it takes advantage of those themes in the levels. The obvious standout here is the pipe maze, because you must figure out in the overworld which pipe takes you to the right location, making the area feel like a level in of itself. The world maps are such an important part of what gives Mario 3 an identity, which also goes for the power-ups, because prior to this, you only had access to the mushroom, fire flower, and star, and while those are considered power-ups, it didn't really affect how you play the game, since the mushroom only allows you to take more hits, and the star just makes you invincible for a couple of seconds, so only the fire flower was the true power-up back then, and even that was in its early stages. So it wasn't until the existence of the brand new Tanuki Leaf that Nintendo said, "Hold on guys, we can make power-ups actually cool." The Tanuki grants you the power of flight, gliding, and tail whacking, which in other games would feel kinda broken, but here, since it's a 2D platformer, this power-up makes total sense, and fixes the jank the jumping used to have in old games, since Zario 3 still falls victim to being really old, but the Tanuki Leaf does help relieve some of the stress while controlling Mario. The only downside of it being the tail whacking part, because even though it's very useful and fun to use, the hitbox on it and the delay time are pretty bad. And I find myself missing and taking a hit more often than actually doing it correctly. And the Tanuki Leaf may or may not be responsible for the existence of furries, since they didn't start becoming a thing till the late 80s, so if the timeline matches up pretty well, while I was going through the game, I came across a funny looking frog suit, and I was confused. I wasn't aware that Mario 3 introduced 2 power-ups, but why would that be? How could one power-up overshadow the other to the point where no one talks about it? And once I used it, I understood why. Because it fucking sucks. This power-up not only serves zero purpose, but also limits mobility because on land, you can only move by hopping. This suit deserves to be forgotten, and I'd rather be in any other form of Mario other than this. But what's neat about the power-ups in this game is that they can be stored and used for later. No longer do you have to pray to find an item box in each level to get one, since now you have a nifty item storage on the bottom screen that lets you access mushrooms, stars, and more whenever you're not in a level. This game in general is very user-friendly, since lives and coins are much more common now, and even if you lose all your lives somehow, it's not going to boot you back to the start of the game. No, because the cool part about Mario 3 is that it's actually fair. But my favorite thing about Mario 3 is that it's weird, and isn't afraid of being weird. Most of, if not every level in this game has one specific gimmick that it rolls with until the very end. Take for example 6-5, where you think you'll play a stereotypical cave level with a pipe on the very right side that leads to the end. And at first, the level does play exactly like that. You jump over a couple of Koopas, avoid a piranha plant, and come across some weird holes in the ceiling. But once you clear all of that, you enter the end pipe and find out, oh, this is not the end of the stage. That's odd. How do I beat it then? So then you explore the level more thoroughly, trying to see if there's an exit or a pipe you missed, but to no avail. But what this level does give you is a whole bunch of Tanuki suits. And what exactly does the Tanuki Leaf give you again? The power of flight. And there's some pretty big openings in the ceiling, like I mentioned before, so naturally, you know you gotta get up there with the leaf. And so you fly up there, and bam, there's the exit. But it's guarded by these guys, and you can't reach the pipe without clearing out the blocks and enemies, which inspires you to look further and realize this cave is filled with shell enemies, which you can pick up and throw. So I go back down, get a turtle shell, and can finally move on. Which is such an unconventional way to make a level around, but I love it. And isn't vague enough where you need a guide to figure it out. No, all the clues are there and it's up to you to put them all together. Granted, not every level is designed like this, and there's some out there that give you no indication of what to do whatsoever, but the vast majority of them are bangers, like the Parabeetle one, the Angry Sun level, the Big Ass Boot level, I could go on. With the only downside of them being that they're way too short. Which I've seen some people say that they like because they can blast through levels and it's really fun for them, but personally, I feel like I can never truly appreciate every level because the second I see the gimmick of it, the little white box at the end is already there. And besides a couple of specific levels, most of them kinda just meshes together together in my mind. Mario 3 also introduces the Koopalings, who will be the bosses of every world and are also Bowser's kids. I love the idea of fighting Bowser's children to the death, and they're all well designed with specific attributes and personalities, which by the way, Iggy is the GOAT and I'll die on that hill. But the novelty quickly wears off once you realize that every one of them is the exact same boss, all taking place on airships, all using the same attacks, and all going down in 3 measly hits. So while I appreciate the idea of them, the fact that they're just a carbon copy of each other that you fight so often definitely weighs down the castle and airship levels by a lot. As always though, the titular end boss is Bowser, and going into the hard but very short final level, I knew the gist of how the boss worked. Just make sure he ground pounds himself into oblivion. So I thought it was gonna be a breeze, only to be met with a sorta difficult match. Not anything mind-blowing, but I had to constantly be aware of my surroundings and make sure I was in the right spot in order to get him to ground pound on top of me, but also don't get ahead of myself and get hit by something in the process. But it's made infinitely better by the fact that it's not the same thing from Mario 1 and Lost Levels. And after saving yet another creepy looking Peach who has a very ominous message. Jesus Christ, what is Peach on? The curtains close on an adventure yet again. Literally. Apparently this game is supposed to be a stage play for some reason. Overall, my thoughts on Mario 3 are very obvious. It's great. It takes the pieces established from the first 2 games and goes wild with it, creating an experience that sets a pretty high bar for the future of Mario games and video games in general. Because I have to mention real quick that this game was still on the NES. Yeah, the same console that had the first 2 Mario games and a bunch of other buggy messes on it. The game was apparently only developed by a little over 10 people in only 2 years, so honestly I'm just astonished at how they were able to make this game a step above and distinct from what came before and after it, and have an adventure that I'd say aged very well on the first ever Nintendo console. On the Mario 3 glass, I'm gonna fill it up to 4/5, and after covering all of that, let's move on to the first portable 2D Mario game. I have lots of interesting thoughts on this game that I can tell you what exactly my experience with it was like, but there is no better way to describe this game other than the box art being the biggest example of video game clickbait. Look at this, we have a cool looking lion, Mario riding a spaceship, aliens apparently, all encapsulated in a desert theme, with best of all the tagline saying, Mario is back for his best adventure yet. And then you actually boot up the game and think, this is Mario's best adventure yet? This game does everything wrong. Mario's too goddamn small, and you can barely tell where he's at and how far you can jump half the time. You're just not able to run at all, which is something that even the first Mario game has, so what happened here? The visuals have zero personality and suck balls. The enemies suck balls. The levels are slow, tedious, and suck balls. And the Super Ball flower allows you to throw balls. And also sucks balls. I kid you not, I can only name 3 positive things that came from this game. 1, the music. For how old and pixely it sounds, it is so goddamn catchy, and is the reason why I love using the Super Ball flower in Mario Maker 2, which is also a much better game than this one. 2, this game introduced Daisy, and we can all agree that the Mario series is better with her existence in it. And 3, it's really funny when you step on a Koopa, they don't just curl up in their shell, and instead they fucking blow up. And yeah, that was my biggest takeaway from this game. Look, it was made for the Game Boy, and it was their first time making a portable Mario game, so it doesn't do any harm, and you can complete it in about 30 minutes, so it won't take too much of your time, but I'd rather use that 30 minutes to listen to the Super Bowl theme over and over than play this game. I'm only filling up the Mario Land glass to 1/3 of the cup. Can't see myself replaying it anytime soon. Before I get into the real meat of Super Mario World, I got a story and a confession to make, which is this game was actually the first experience I ever had with Mario. Although Mario World came out 13 years before I did, I owned a copy of this game. On the Game Boy Advance. This Game Boy wasn't technically my own, and it was actually my sister's, but regardless, I probably used it the most out of the three of us. And on this Game Boy, we all used to play two specific games, one of them being Super Mario Advance 2. Again, I was extremely young when I played this back then, so I have little to no memory of how much I liked it. But I do remember one very specific thing, that being, we never got super far into it, and it wasn't because my sisters and I were bad, but because I always erased the copies of the game whenever I could, which led to my sisters getting really mad at me, but I still do it anyways because I thought it was really funny. So finally returning to this game 15 years later felt kind of poetic in a way, so I could finish what Little Glass Half Full could never. And right off the bat, I am not only hit with a huge wave of nostalgia, but also notice the sheer quality this game presents. Now this is the first game in the series, kinda, that doesn't take place in the Mushroom Kingdom, and instead we're in the Dino Kingdom, filled with a couple of dinosaurs here and there. Look, I don't mean to start off in a negative way, but for a game that's set in Dino Land, it doesn't use that theme to its advantage. Because other than a couple of enemies and a boss we'll get to later, it feels like a regular Mario world yet again. But as for my first impressions when playing this game, Mario feels much more slippery and flexible than ever before. One of the coolest things when doing these marathons is seeing how much a series controls-wise changes over time. And even though the basics of Mario are still there, he is a lot more fun to use than before. I don't know if it's the nature of the NES or how awful it felt to control Mario in the Game Boy version, but he just feels so much more fluid here. Jumping feels more precise, running doesn't feel as locked in as before, and overall platforming feels less stiff. Along with that, we get to see the new added moves to Mario's moveset, which includes the spin jump, a more powered up but less controlled jump that comes in very handy for avoiding spiky objects or destroying blocks in your way. And I absolutely love how these additions are never a one-time thing, and are always added onto the next 2D Mario and expanded upon. Which also goes for the level design as well, because I feel like 95% of this game has straight bangers. At one point you're chilling on a lava skeleton ride, and in the next you're dodging a Kamek who's disintegrating the blocks you stand on. While not every level is super unique, the way they all flow together makes for an experience that feels like you're never on any downtime. And I guess that's because of how well the roadmap and levels intersect with each other. Because you have Mario 3 out here, which has a designated world filled with levels, and once you finish that world, the player is transported to a completely different environment, not in any way similar to the last. But in this game, it's all one continuous path. From the start of the game to the end, Mario's going straight ahead, which makes Dino Land feel a lot more unpredictable, since castle levels are usually very far apart, but Wario World breaks that tradition and has no set pattern design, but still makes each level always feel natural at where they belong. Are you in a cave in the overworld? Okay, then we got a cave level. Standing on top of a high up bridge, prepare for lots of jumping on wooden platforms. Everything about the world and levels in this game is organized, and makes for a set of flow that will keep you playing for hours on end. With the only drawback being, there's no way of fast travel. And if you want to go from World 3 to like World 8, you gotta take a very long walk to get there. As per usual, we get the brand new power-ups, which this time around we got a grand total of 1.5. So I love the feather suits, how can you not? Mario gets a super cool looking cape akin to something a kid would wear to look like a superhero, and in the game it is very useful for your playthrough. I loved it back then and I still do now, but this playthrough made me realize that the cape suit is basically a Tanuki suit with a new coat of paint. Just think about what are the main abilities that both power-ups give you. 1. Flying, 2. Gliding, and 3. Tail whapping. Granted, tail whapping is much better in this game, but it doesn't excuse the fact that they're basically the same thing. And the other one, being the pea balloon, while funny, is kind of situational and doesn't give you anything that cool. So in terms of power-ups, Mario World does not have the greatest showcase, but your new pal Yoshi completely makes up for it. Not only are you trying to save Peach this time around, but also rescue the captured Yoshis from each castle. And to do that, Mario makes the ultimate team-up, which now results in this. Yoshi has the ability to jump high, eat enemies, and shit out those enemies, and also has some really weird looking arms. And it's a fun way to spice up the gameplay, since Yoshi isn't a one-time gimmick and can appear in every level. Aside from Yoshi, the other big thing that differentiates Mario World from other past 2D Mario games are secret exits and block buttons. As I said for my Mario 3 section, the levels can be really good, but are very short. And to prevent that, this game has a bunch of different exits and levels, every time resulting in a random key you find to open up a keyhole. And for the most part, this is a really good addition, since it keeps you on your toes whenever you play a level, looking around and either coming across a key or a keyhole and knowing somewhere in this level there's a secret waiting to be discovered. And it's not like the warp zones in Mario 1 where the secret exits only allow you to skip worlds, but now it grants access to other things as well, like to the Star World or a pit stop where you can get power-ups, and even opens up new terrain. There's actually a whole area in this game based off the idea of finding secret exits in the Forest of Illusions, where you not only have to find the secret exit to escape it, but also find the secret button that unlocks the green blocks, and in doing so making some levels easier because you went out of your way to find them. So the secret exits in this game aren't just here to pad out game time, but also reward you and gift you in ways that basically tell you, good job not playing the game at the bare minimum. My only problem with the secret exits is how stupidly hidden some of them are. Like half the time it's just, oh, here's a random key, go find the keyhole. And at other times it's, oh, enter this pipe at this exact moment, so you trigger an event that leads you to a different area to find the key, with no visual clues or indicators at all. How did 90s kids figure this out back then? Now before I talk about the end of the game, I gotta mention the bosses, which just so happens to be the Koopalings again. Which again is disappointing since we're in Dino Island and we have the exact same bosses again. And a Triceratops, I guess, which would have been really cool if it wasn't just a Ferris wheel. And as for the Koopalings, although I would have preferred not to see them again, at least there's something original going on about them this time around. They're still easy, but they tried at least. But as for the final level, I gotta say it's a massive improvement from previous games. The design of the castle is dope. I love the lightning strikes in the background. I love how the castle sort of recaps some other obstacles you came across in your journey, and the final boss itself. Look at that, an actual climactic and hard boss. Bowser does a great job at making it feel dangerous, since you and everything else is so small and the clown cart takes up so much of the screen, with a variety of attacks that aren't so easy to dodge, and best of all, it doesn't go down in 3 hits. As of right now, it's definitely the best final boss the Wario series has to offer, concluding with some fireworks in the background and a not creepy looking Peach. So you free all the Yoshis and the game would come to a close if it wasn't for the brand new post-game levels. As a reward for finding some secret exits, you gain access to an entirely new world. And as someone who's played tons of secret worlds before, I was quite terrified for what this game's Star World would have to offer. And since this game is much harder than the new Super Mario Bros. Games, I had to mentally prepare myself for what kind of hellish levels are to come from this. Oh, that was actually not that bad. Yeah, instead of being a gauntlet full of tough levels, it's sort of just a victory lap. Like, one of them is literally just spinning on blocks till you get to the bottom, and that's it. But I guess some of them are kind of cool, like this one with the clouds and everything, and they even provide you Yoshis as well. Oh my god! Wait, did Baby Yoshis originate from this game? This was such a genuine shock to me since I never got this far when I played this as a kid. So I had zero knowledge of this game also showcasing Baby Yoshis for the first time. They don't really do much, but I thought that Mario U was the first game to have them, but turns out I was lied to. Now again, that would usually be the place where I end things off. But if you push down all the colored buttons and get the secret exit in this level, it turns out that this game not only had a secret world, but a super secret world. And here's where I'm like, oh shit. These guys are going to be the most hair-pulling, agonizing levels in this game. And I'm going to have an absolutely horrible time trying to beat every level. Huh, never mind. Okay, while this was a bit tougher than the Star World, it wasn't anything that bad. Except for Tubular, which gave me a little bit of trouble, I got through all of them with little challenge along the way. A bit more anticlimactic from what I was expecting, but the names of every level really made up for it. Like, come on, we got levels like Way Cool, Outrageous, and my personal favorite, Mondo. Yeah, I don't know what the fuck a Mondo is, but I dig it. And that's Super Mario World. It has a couple of unpolished ideas and can rely on the same gimmicks a bit too much and has some really weird setbacks like the whole feather suit thing and lackluster bosses, but those negatives are outshined by the overwhelming amount of positives in this game. Although there's some heavy nostalgia, this is probably some of the best that the 2D platformer genre has to offer, and for that I'm filling up the Mario World Cup to almost the top of the glass. Oh, and also, if you're wondering if I still have that Super Mario Advance 2 cartridge, I don't. What happened was I lent it to a friend back in kindergarten and he told me to have it back in a couple of days. And after a few weeks, I asked for it back and he said he lost it. And before I could confirm that with his parents, he moved away and I never saw him again. So, Matthew, if you're somehow watching this video, fuck you, I want my game back. So, this is technically under the Mario World banner and is a 2D platformer, but it acts a lot more like a Yoshi game than a traditional Mario game, so... As you can tell, I was very happy when I first completed Super Mario Land, because now I don't have to touch that shitty game ever again. So imagine my distraught when I learned that this game had its own sequel. Luckily for me, I was able to keep my emotions in check, and even though I really did not want to go through all that again, I am a man of the people and must keep my word on completing every 2D Mario for this video. And so with the press of an A button, I embrace myself for whatever mediocre or crappy game I was gonna play. And out of all the Marios I played for this video, this one surprises me the most because this one is really good. The game's plot is simple. Wario has an evil castle and he must get all 6 golden coins to unlock the door to get to his castle and beat Wario's ass. But the way the game progresses was something I never expected in a million years. Because in a strange way, this game has a bit of an open world vibe to it. You have a world map where you control Tario to different locations of the area. And in this world you find zones that contain all these levels you must complete to get a golden coin from. And these areas aren't just ordinary sand or lava worlds, and instead are super specific themes. The first one I went to was the wood zone, and in it you navigate yourself through a tree, and it has a bunch of cool concepts for levels, like this one that has cool sapling physics, and in this other one you are navigating your way through this beehive, and all these bees are coming out of their honeycombs to attack you. And at this point I realized, oh my god, unlike the prequel game, Mario Land 2 oozes personality and has fantastic level design. And the best part about it, the wood zone is probably the worst and least creative zone in this game, because aside from that, we have the pumpkin zone, which is all Halloween themed and has witches and chibi Jason Voorhees walking around, and even the turtle zone, which could have just been a stationary water area, but it's not, and instead has you engulfed inside a giant turtle, and then you're eaten again by a giant whale living inside said giant turtle. I could go on for a long time talking about how diverse each area is, but by far the two that knock it out of the park are the Mario and Macro zones. The Mario zone has a super dope layout to it where you're making your way through a giant robot Mario, and each level you play through is located inside a different body part, like Mario's foot, his mouth, and even his peen. I'm sorry, the joke was right there. And the Macro Zone has a great format as well, but also amazing level progression, since it follows a super tiny Mario in the area map, navigating his way inside a giant house, but in the levels, we get to see Mario actually make his way inside the house at the same time. Level 1, you're in the garden, jumping over flower pots and passing over blades of grass, until you find the pipe that leads inside the house. Next level finds you on the main floor of the house, with a lot of household objects disguised as enemies and platforms in your way while you try to reach the second floor. And finally, you fight a boss resembling a house rat, which should have been super small, but makes sense for how Mario is currently macro sized. And like I mentioned before, this can be completed in any order you like, which doesn't need to be there. There is no 2D Mario before or after this game that lets you play a Mario game in this manner. But the fact that they went out of their way to incorporate this shows signs of pure passion the developers had when working on this. And since Mario Land 2 released before 64, we can technically call this the first actual open world / sandbox Mario game. Alongside the zone feature, we get introduced to a new power-up as well. We got the carrot suit. And just like the cape and Tanuki power-ups, the carrot carrot grants Gario the power of flight and gliding, but the main difference between the two is that the carrot is broken. They added some limitations to the other power-ups I mentioned, but this one straight up lets you glide infinitely, making the already easy levels a breeze to get through. Which is something I should also mention, being out of all the games on this list, Mario Land 2 is by far the easiest. Not only because of the carrot suit, but also the levels don't present much of a challenge and the bosses are complete pushovers. They're also a weak link in this game as well, since the level design and zones are so creative that the bosses just pale in comparison. Like for example, the Mario zone features Mario going through a robot Mario's body. I wonder what's the boss gonna be? A fucking pig. Thankfully though, the final level makes up for this a little bit since it is quite long and proves to be tricky sometimes, with multiple doors and different platforming challenges in your way, all ending with a showdown with Wario, which includes Wario using the carrot suit for himself. So while the easy difficulty of the game is pretty noticeable, it doesn't compare to what the biggest problem of the game is. It's on the Game Boy. It had to be limited in so many ways. Like in the prequel, the screen is way too small. Like I can barely get a good look at things around me since the screen is so zoomed in on Mario, and I can't help but feel like all the unique ideas the devs had for this game couldn't be fully realized with the hardware they were working with. Which sucks, because I know that this game is already great, but it could have been so much more if it didn't have all these limitations put onto it. But hey, I can't complain that much. This game gives us a Mario who doesn't even have a mission of saving a princess. No, he just wants his get back on Wario. It's a very short game and I can't recommend it enough. As of right now, I have it filled up a little above 7/10 of the cup. But if it was given a remake of some sort, it could have been so much higher. But as it is, it's one of the best games you could get for the Game Boy. And makes me question about why its predecessor that was on this same console was so awful compared to this. Like, what the hell happened, Nintendo? Okay guys, I need to ask for a favor real quick. Do you mind if I not talk about all of the new Super Mario Bros. Games? Look, I know this is supposed to be the ultimate 2D Mario marathon, but I really don't feel like talking about the same game over and over again. Because let's be honest, if I do talk about them in their own segregated section, I'm gonna repeat myself a ton, and that doesn't seem like a lot of fun. And also, I already talked about each game at length in this video I made a couple months ago. So I decided that I'm mostly going to talk about New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, as that's the ultimate new soup game from the series. And I'll still bring up the other games in the series if I deem necessary, so you'll still get my thoughts on each game. I do feel bad since this kind of takes a point away from this video, and there might be people angry with me that I didn't talk about all these games. So to make it up to you, I had my friend slap me in the face really hard as a punishment. Okay, don't slap me too hard, but it's where it's gonna hurt. Ah! So New Super Mario Bros. U. There's a lot to unpack with this game here, with it being the second to most recent 2D Mario game that came out 11 years ago. And it's still priced at $60 fucking. I actually remember this game being a Christmas gift that my dad hid from me because he didn't want me to play it before the 25th. But I managed to find it and play it before Christmas anyways. And I had a good time with it back then. I didn't really form any heavy opinions or thoughts on it because I was 9 and my only thoughts on it back then were Mario's a chipmunk. So revisiting it now, I was curious as to how it'll stack up compared to the golden age of 2D Mario. Because online, this game and the new series receives a ton of flack, some warranted and vice versa. So let's see what's up with the series. Well, first off, this game features more than one character to play as. We got Hario, Luigo, Bloop Toad, and Yell Toad. And new to Deluxe in particular, we got Nab Dude and Toadette. And since this is a new game, it's only appropriate I choose Toadette to see how she stacks up against the typical Mario cast. But also, fuck that. That sounds lame as shit. I'm playing as Luigi. So as you enter the world of Mario U, you notice that every level in the game now has a name to it. No longer are they called 2-4 or 7-Castle, but now they have titles and can give you some hints as to what level you're about to play. While not a huge deal, I like this change, as it gives some personality to these levels than prior games have. And also, they're not nearly as cool as Mario World special names, but it's still a nice touch. And while playing this game, I realized man, I really missed Mario's moveset in this game, expanding upon the previous 2D Mario yet again and feeling more robust than ever, adding the ground pound and wall jumping to this game, which, let's be honest, are the two coolest attacks you can do in the Mario series. It's also here I noticed that Mario's moveset is getting a lot closer to how he controls in his 3D counterpart. Another thing that this game does a great job at is the power-ups, because it feels like in the new Super Mario Bros. Series that Nintendo finally realized the potential power-ups had from before. Because once you think about it, Mario 3 only had the Tanuki and Mario World had the feather, which is cool, but again, they're kind of the same thing, and compare that to now where we get bam, 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 plenty of additions to Mario's closet. Blue Shell from the DS version was dope as hell to use. Propeller Suit was very useful and made great use of the Wii Remote. And the Ice Flower finally making an appearance in what should have been long overdue, but still doesn't take away from the fact that it's still an amazing addition, just to be made completely obsolete by the Penguin Suit that was introduced in the same game, which also earns my best power-up in all of 2D Mario reward. And finally, as for new power-ups in Mario U, we got the Acorn, which is really lame. It's just a worse propeller suit, which makes it an even worse Tanuki and feather suit, because they all grant you the ability to do the same thing. But the Acorn in particular is the worst at doing it. So the biggest topic of discussion when it comes to this game is that it doesn't have a personality or it's super lazy. And coming into it, I wanted to see how true those statements are. And honestly, after playing it, I think they're very wrong. Because you can tell within the first few minutes that this game has a lot of charm. Case in point, the enemies and the music. Every world in this game has a select theme to it, which by itself is very relaxing and good to listen to, but then you start to notice that it's not just you vibing out to the music, but the enemies as well. The Koopas are swaying their arms, the Goombas are jumping on beat. It's quite cute. But my favorite rendition of this is when you have a baby Yoshi alongside you, and not only does the theme change, but the little guy also starts singing along to his own tune, which is such a tiny detail, but makes these little guys so much more adorable as a result. And another smaller yet cooler detail that I love is a subtle hint of progression in this game. The whole premise of Mario U is not only saving the princess, but also claiming Peach's castle back once Bowser throws you out of it. And in the background of the first level, you see the castle very, very far back, signifying how long you have to go till you get back to Peach's castle. But with each world, you can see the castle getting closer and closer to you, until you reach the World 7 castle when it looks like you're just a couple steps away. Again, it's a detail that not many people notice while playing the game, but you can feel that Nintendo did feel passionate about Mario's adventure. So the game does have a personality. So is the hate no longer justified? And well, instead of saying that the game doesn't have a personality, I say it's more so the fact that Mario U does not have an identity. Despite being called new Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, in terms of new things this game does, there aren't a lot. And I'm not talking about compared to other new Soup games. I'm talking about how Mario U doesn't make an effort to stand out even compared to the old Mario games. Look at this huge interconnected game that you seamlessly go from world to world with no loading times. Just like Mario World. You have to defeat Boom Boom in each mid-castle, but in every rendition, Boom Boom has a new power-up. Just like Mario 3. There's a part in the Jungle World where you gotta find secret exits to escape. Just like Mario World again. You see where I'm going with this? That's why I was so surprised when I found out that Baby Yoshis first existed in Mario World, because that means they weren't a unique idea in this game, and was borrowed. And the worst part is those borrowed aspects from each game are done worse in this one. Like, Yoshi's back, isn't that awesome? Oh, but you can't take him to other levels. That kinda defeats the whole purpose of him. The game doesn't try to take any risks, and just redoes the things from before that seem to work. And he even goes so far as to the level design, where there used to be levels I thought were so cool 10 years ago, and only now realizing that it was ripped off from something 30 years ago. I guess that's a little bit of a con when it comes to these marathons, since older Mario fans would have loved those callbacks to games they played decades ago. Well, for me, I played the game a couple of days ago. But even then, I swear I can only count up to 5 new things that this game does, and those 5 things aren't even that cool. Like, wow, you can choose to either go to the water area or the snow area. What a big decision! But if you want to access the Star World, you gotta beat both worlds anyways, so you don't actually get a decision. And regarding those worlds as well, they're all generic as shit. Everyone can name the order of them, and it's nothing we've never seen before. But the game doesn't even try to hide how generic those area themes are. Like, I thought I would never say this in my life, but this game should have taken a page out of Mario Land's 2 book, where instead of generic-ass boring area themes, we actually have some cool places to explore. Like, Odyssey also had a jungle area, but it was cool since it had industrial aspects and there was a whole robot civilization living there. But no, we only get boring-ass levels in a boring-ass place. Until you reach the end parts of the game. And it really pains me to say this, but I gotta give credit where credit is due. Guys, IGN was right when they said,
by the time Mario U really starts to do interesting things, it's over.
It's actually kinda true. With World 6 specifically, it has this whole gimmick going on of buttons to change the layout of the area, since the end castle of the world has a hidden star coin you can't access unless you have the blocks set up accordingly, which can't happen unless you find the secret exits in some of these levels. Now this is a totally original and cool idea, and makes World 6 more memorable than any other place in the game, and it's a shame we can't have other unique features for other worlds, because after World 6 we go back to the same mundane design. But apart from that, you start to notice that levels have more variety to them. There's a mid-boss that isn't Boom Boom, and Peach's castle transforms into a cool lava castle. But it's a shame that this is all happening when the game is 90% near completion. So IGN actually made a good call for once. They also said the game was a 9.1 out of 10, but you can't do everything right. And it's a shame that the legacy of no identity or purpose lives on because of the other half that drags down the game. And what also can drag down the game heavy is how Mario U is permanently put on baby mode the whole way through. You are thrown so many lives and power-ups constantly that make the game feel easy at all times, which hurts levels from becoming more fun, but especially drags down the boss battles into the dirt. Once again, we're facing off against the Koopalings. Generic, I know. But some of the battles here have some pretty distinct layouts to it, like Roy, which has you jumping from platform to platform while dodging bullet bills, all the while you don't fall to your death. And it should be really cool if jumping on their heads wasn't so damn easy. Because what happens most often is I immediately jump on their head the second they pop out of their shell. And with the Roy boss in particular, it is so easy to cheese him because he is so damn slow. And I have to purposely avoid him for a bit just so I can get footage and not immediately end the battle in 10 seconds. And it can be fixed so easily if they gave the bosses some kind of cooldown or something. Because this is just laughable at how bad the bosses can be. Except for the final one, I guess. Because this one specifically in U is always a fun time. In every Mario game that's not World, you're trying to find a switch or a button to send off Bowser into a pit. But this game has none of that. And you're going back and forth. Dodging fireballs and his stomps is quite exhilarating, and of course smashing him is very satisfying. Overall, a 7.5 out of 10. Only thing that's weighing him down is he's defeated after 3 hits, and I would have preferred if he had a couple more attacks. I don't know if this one's my favorite since the Wii one is really good, so we'll call it a tie for now. And finally, we have the Superstar World. These levels have some pretty fun gimmicks, with Run For It and Swim For Your Life being clear standouts. I definitely think that this is a better and a more difficult challenge over Mario World, but Mario World exceeds it in almost every other category, so I'm honestly just throwing it a bone at this point. I know I complained on end for the most part, but you can't deny that Mario U is a good time, especially if you grab some friends. I actually played this game with a couple of my buds not too long ago, and it's infinitely more fun. Definitely a better experience than playing alone, but if you are alone, it'll still satisfy you. It's the most vanilla a Mario game can get, but sometimes that simplicity is what we need most. It's better than some of the really old Mario games, but there's still a wide margin between Mario U and the best of the best. I'm filling up the glass to about the same as Mario Land 2. If you're asking which one I'd rank higher, it would probably be the former, platformer, but it could change depending on my mood. You know, for how generic this whole series is, I talked about it a lot longer than I wanted to. But now that I'm done with that, I can finally put this game down and not touch it for a really long time. New Super Luigi U is the exact same game as Mario U with the same story, bosses, and world, but it is way better than it because it stars Luigi. I would say I'm a pretty big Luigi fan, so seeing him star in his own game automatically makes it a 10 out of 10. Aside from the Luigi part though, it's actually a better experience than Mario U, for the sole purpose of this game actually having an identity. So since Mario U and Luigi U look virtually identical, I'm gonna use this dark green background to signify I'm talking about Luigi U, so y'all don't get mixed up. Yeah. Every level in this game is very short, coming to a little over a minute long. And originally, I feel like this would make levels even more forgettable than before. But for some reason, this super fast pace works. Every level seemingly has a new idea and throws it at you in a way you wouldn't forget. There's 3 categories that these levels fall into. 1. A shortened version of their counterparts from Mario U. 2. A new level that borrows elements from its original level. Or 3. Just a whole new level entirely. And surprisingly, for how short these levels can be, they are packed with cool details. Take 3-1 for example, where all these crabs have little homes they live in and there's cool things you can find in there. Or the fact that every level in the game has a hidden Luigi for you to find that makes you audibly say, "Holy shit, it's a Luigi! I like Luigi." So in a lot of cases, this game actually has more personality to it than its predecessor, and reminds me of a game like Mario 3 where the levels are all distinct in their own way, but are very concise and short. So you're never taking a back step, especially because this game makes Luigi really floaty. Playing these games back to back felt really weird to get used to, since Mario, or Luigi from Mario U, is so stationary and compact, while Luigi from Luigi U, God, why did I play the same character in both games, goes all over the place when he moves, which can make for some slightly harder platforming, but honestly, I kind of prefer these controls. It feels more fun to play with, since you can jump to places you would have never been able to make before, but it comes with the cost of stability. And blasting through levels with what looks to be insane platforming just makes for a more fun experience. And also, Luigi has a little feet twiddle when he's crouching while jumping, so this game is clearly peak. So now let's move on and talk about shit, never mind, that's it actually. Other than the remixed levels and altered controls, there's not much else to mention. But despite that, this game pretty much fixes Mario U to the best it possibly can. And for how little the developers had to work with, it came out to be a pretty good product. If I were to review it on a separate glass, it's gonna come out to be a little higher than Mario U, which pretty much confirms that Luigi is the better brother, and there's nothing you can say to prove me otherwise. I think there's a certain moment in this game, a moment where everyone realizes that this 2D Mario is on a whole other level, unlike anything that came beforehand. And I'm not saying that before this game came out, people weren't excited, quite the contrary, but no amount of marketing or promotion could ever prepare us for what we realized in this moment. And it's not in the intro, the opening cutscene, or the first level, but it's the second you touch a Wonder Seed and then witness an entire level based on piranha plants having a set dance choreography while singing. This is when everyone who purchased this game realized, oh god, that was the best thing I've ever witnessed, and it's only the second level. This game is like a train that has no stops, an endless bike ride downhill, a pogo stick that never drops, and every other analogy for something that has no slow points. But before I talk about that, I must mention how Wonder changes up the Mario formula by a lot. And there's 3 specific ways that this game does that before you even start playing. First off, you don't need to play as the Mario Bros. There is a whopping 12 characters to control, each with their own unique animations and personalities, and I couldn't wait to try and play as all of them. Secondly, even though we're used to Mario games taking place outside of the Mushroom Kingdom, Wonder by far does the best job at showcasing how different this place is from what we're used to. Like, while Mario World is set in Dino Land, it doesn't take advantage of that setting, still having mostly the same surroundings and familiar faces, and it only acts as a stand-in so the game can be quote-unquote different. While here, we get to see how different the Flower Kingdom is, having its own prince, its own civilians, crazy sub-areas, and even its own currency. And while we get this sort of thing from the 3D games, seeing it in Wonder is very impressive. But those are the obvious though. The other change that I really love is Bowser and how he has more of a presence here than ever before. Like, really think about Bowser in each previous game and what kind of role he plays in the story, and the immediate answer is, oh, he's the main villain, which is not really correct. Sure, he's the final boss, but other than the fights, he makes no appearances, and it's usually Bowser Jr. who you're seeing most of the time. But here, he's in action from the beginning, becoming a huge castle guy and being smack dabbed in the middle of the game as a reminder to why exactly you're collecting all these royal seeds. And let me just say, Bowser was really smart for trying to take over the Flower Kingdom this time around. It is by far the most fleshed out and unique place to explore in the world of Mario, which includes the 3D games. Instead of having a straightforward path to the end like Mario U or World, or segregated areas to complete in an order like Mario 3 or Wii, the game sorta combines the two in a way and even draws inspiration from Mario 64 a bit. Since for the most part, the player is going down a straightforward path to the end, but in that path you gain access to other secluded areas off Petal Isles. And in those areas, most levels can be played out of order, and some can only be accessed with a certain amount of Wonder Seeds, creating this linear yet sandbox progression, meaning this game is somehow more open world than most 3D Mario games, which is something I thought I'd never say. So the Flower Kingdom is already great, but what really completes it is how visually appealing and vibrant it looks compared to other Mario games. Now, this was already highlighted before the game came out, but it's still crazy how good this game can look. The colors are so aesthetically pleasing and flashy, and it lends itself to making every tiny object feel so expressive. Like, I look at Mario in this game compared to Mario U, and it's night and day. Mario here looks plastic and has the same emotionless face at every turn, but in Wonder, the littlest of things have some sort of expression attached to it. Just look at the way Luigi gains a power-up here. He touches the fire flower and boom, he strikes a baller-ass pose. It looks like a page ripped right out of a comic book. And compare that to before, where he just touches a mushroom and oh, he's big now, I guess. That's cool. The old version doesn't deteriorate the gameplay at all, but it shows the lengths Nintendo went to make this game in a different class all by itself. Because in the end, if I were to describe this game in one word, it would be unusual, which also happens to be its best attribute. And I think the main reason why Wonder was made like this was because of the existence of the Mario Maker games. With everything that was added into that series, it would be nigh impossible to go back to making standard Mario games, since it could never live up to the sheer imagination of 15 million Mario fans making levels. So Nintendo needed a solution to that problem, and with Wonder, they did something that is not a common practice when it comes to making video games, but should be considered one after how well this game turned out to be. Basically, Miyamoto went up to every developer and said, "Alright, I'm gonna be leaving now, hope y'all have fun." It's like the same thing I said for Mario 3 and Luigi U, where each level has its own gimmick, but it's dialed up to 1,000 in Wonder. Each level feels so distinct from the last, and the only thing that feels remotely similar is the environment they resound in. And the biggest reason as to why this game feels like this is because of all the new enemies that were made for Wonder. There's over 70 enemies in this game, and they're all given a chance to shine and bring out the best in each level they reside in. But this isn't like a quantity over quality thing. Each mob is meticulously crafted to the same detail like the main characters are. All of them, new and old, are given so much personality and character quirks than ever before, and no longer feel like they're awkwardly placed in every level as an obstacle for you to get past, and instead go hand in hand wherever they are to make the world feel lived in. My personal favorite is the little popcorn guy who literally pops when he gets heated up, and as a big big popcorn guy myself, it made me a pretty happy guy. And it shows such a stark difference to any game beforehand. Like, oh, Mario U, what enemies did you introduce, huh? A squirrel? That's it? That's the best you have to offer? I realize now that I'm really digging into Mario U hard right now. Like, trust me, I like the game a whole lot. It's just that it was the last 2D Mario to come out before this one, so it's hard not to draw comparisons to how they outdid themselves here. To the point where Wonder makes every other 2D Mario, yes, even the great ones, look awful side by side. And there's no better way to highlight that than in the levels themselves. In Mario Wonder, I like to classify every level as having two parts to it. The first part is the build-up. It introduces what the level is going to be about and what enemy is going to be the most prominent. And as it stands right now, these levels are on the same par as Mario World and Mario 3. They feel very distinct from one another, but also have a nice flow to it. But they also have secret places and obstacles to overcome and have collectible star coins in them to keep you looking everywhere in the level to find them. And there's also these flower bros who always find something to say to you, and I gotta stick around and listen to whatever they have to say. Like this one right here always speaks the truth.
Subscribe to the Glass Half Full.
Huh, what an interesting and cool thing to say. Maybe you should also listen to him. Please. By and large, these are already really good levels and can stand on their own 2 feet with other classic Mario levels. But that isn't the end of it though, because eventually you'll find a Wonder Seed lurking around somewhere, which begins the second part, the payoff. Or like how I like to call it, weird shit. The Wonder Seeds section adds a twist in the level that either fits in line with the level theme or not at all. Like in this one, where you're jumping on all these balloon enemies, and the Wonder twist is you become a balloon yourself, which fits in line with the level, but also a good nod back to the P-Balloon in Mario World. Or on the complete other side, where you're playing around with all these vine guys, and in the next moment, you have to solve a math equation. Some of these twists can be stretched out into an entire world filled with content, but Wonder is constantly moving on to the next idea, the next way it can surprise you. One of my favorite examples of a level that uses the part 1 and part 2 analogy is Maw Maw Mouthful, where it's filled with enemies called Maw Maws, where they want to take a big gulp out of you. For the most part, they're pretty easy to dodge and don't serve much of a threat to you due to your jumping and speed advantages. However, you do see them eat Goombas, which can be a little funny. This is even remarked by a flower guy in the level, so when the second part comes, the Wonder Seed completely flips that on our head because it turns us into a Goomba, which makes us lose all of our advantages, and the Maws, which didn't serve as a threat before, are now infinitely more terrifying, and we must use different strategies to get to the end of the level, which not only makes for a fun time, but an incredible way to tie part 1 and 2 together. Granted, not every level is designed with this philosophy, and some Wonder Seed sections are very lackluster, but the unique ones by far outweigh the bad, and for a game with 150 or so levels, I think they're allowed to tone it down for a couple. You're even able to go online and play these levels alongside people worldwide, which made me say, wow. What a pointless feature. But what's interesting about Wonder is that it isn't all just big levels, and for the first time in the series, it introduces mini levels. These are much more self-contained and quick levels within the game, mostly consisting of KO arenas, break times, and challenges. These are a nice way to deviate from the typical level structure and offer up some unique tasks you wouldn't find normally. And this sort of level and story progression reminds me of Splatoon 3 in a way. In that game, each level is occupied with usual long-form levels, but also have some side missions that make you do a super specific and small task. And it works, since those levels have some really cool ideas to them, but can only be used once before it becomes oversaturated. Like the search party levels in particular are really neat, because in these ones you have to find the 5 MacGuffins to get the Wonder Seed, and these are all pretty hard to find by yourself. And before I gave up and looked for a guide, I remembered that this game has an online function to it, and once I turned it back on, I finally realized the full potential this feature has to offer. Because now you're able to play alongside other people and working together to find find all 5 parts. This also goes for regular levels as well, as you can find countless clips online of people helping each other and finding secret coins or reviving them from the dead. And in the end, it brings some sort of community feeling to the game that doesn't appear anywhere else. Which makes for a good time to mention for how distinct this game is compared to other 2D Marios. It actually borrows a lot of elements from past games. I already mentioned a couple of connections like the world map or taking place in another region, but there are so many other things I could mention. Gobblegut from Mario Galaxy, Mario transformations a la Mario Odyssey, secret exits like Mario World, and many more. But the reason they feel unique is because of how this game makes all those elements feel much more fleshed out than before. Take for example those mini enemy encounters in New Super Mario Bros. And Mario 3, where you have to quickly dispatch a couple of the same mob to proceed, which felt very unneeded and was only there to pad out the gameplay. And in this game, there is a version of that, but now with KO arenas. But instead of one measly fight, it's now a gauntlet, where you must get through 4 different sections of 4 different enemies, added on with the fact that you must complete the level under a certain amount of time if you want to get all 3 star coins, which makes it much more nerve-wracking but fleshed out at the same time. Mario Wonder is a masterpiece example of how to add new elements from a long-running series and perfecting the craft of other mediocre parts from previous games, which is also highlighted in the badge system, which beforehand I thought was gonna break the game, but instead it just makes platforming a little easier and are also callbacks to character-specific controls that can now be executed by anyone, like the flutter kicks from Luigi U and how the twist badge is basically just a more controlled propeller suit, which were also both my go-tos when I played this game. So now there's no definitive best character to use since they're all treated as equal. Except for the Yoshis and Nabbit, because for some reason they're invincible and you can't toggle that off, so they're kinda just less fun to use than the other guys. And of course Wonder also has new power-ups, 3 in total. I like all of them a whole lot and they feel better utilized compared to other power-ups we got in the past. Bubbler felt like a long time coming since we already have the fire and ice flower, but the extra mobility you gain from using it is really fun to use. I can imagine it'll go crazy in the speedruns. The drill power-up comes in really handy to you since you're able to dig yourself anywhere and can find some secrets, and all in all, it's a cooler version of the drill from Galaxy. And the elephant power-up is the big one here. Bashing your way through enemies is very satisfying, and having increased power is cool and all, but one thing I see no one talking about when it comes to this power-up is how it's different from everything that came before it design-wise. Think about the other animal power-ups we got before, like the cat or penguin suit. In these renditions, Mario just, you know, puts the animal costume on him and that's that. But here, it's different. Mario isn't just putting an elephant trunk on him. No, for the first time ever, you are the elephant. And I find that so crazy. Does it change the gameplay at all? No. So why did I mention it? Well, because I think elephants are really cool. One common point of discussion I see online is that this is one of the easier 2D Marios, which I'd probably have to agree with if it wasn't for the stupid fucking Goomba level. I won't go too in depth since I can rant about this level for a while, but just know I threw my controller in rage because of this experience. This game has its difficult moments, especially coming from the late challenge levels and special world, but for a Mario veteran such as myself, God, that sounds so fucking lame. Oh, yeah, it wasn't super hard. I got by the game with only getting 2 game overs in total. So after playing the past 8 or so 2D Mario games, I've come to a very, very sad realization that every game has some really shitty bosses. You can hear me say that in every single section in this video and are overall the worst aspects in these games. So coming into Wonder, my biggest hope for it were for the bosses to be good. And did I get my wish? Yeah. But they're still the worst part of the game. By definition, the bosses, or just boss, gives me what I wanted. Different phases, cooldown, goes down in more than 3 hits, and not being stale are all checked marked on the list. But people still aren't satisfied, and I wondered why. This boss does something different from what the past 35 or so years have given us, and we're still unsatisfied. But that's when I realized something. It's just the fact that everything else in this game is so goddamn wonderful that a good boss boss doesn't cut it for this game and makes it stand out badly. And also added by the fact that there's only 3 bosses in this game, one being the final one and the other one just being a button. So in actuality, we only get one. And it makes me wonder why. Why is it in a game that's so unique and brings so much new stuff to it that they didn't use this same amount of effort for the bosses? Like, the Brutals were overall lackluster, but they were new, and I love their inclusion in the game and made Odyssey much better because of it. And with the lack of interesting bosses, it really downplays the end castles to each world, since everything leading up to it is so perfect, and then when we get to the climax, it doesn't pay off at all, which is especially apparent in World 5 because it doesn't have an ending. In this world, your whole mission is to save the miners, and as you get deeper and deeper into the cave, you start to think that something might have happened to them, and we have to defeat a big old boss to save them. But when you get to the final level, they're just chilling there, and that's it. No cool battle. The whole time as I watched them ramble, I was ready for like a mole guy or something, I don't know, to appear and attack me, but it didn't happen, making this whole journey down there feel very anticlimactic. But then Bowser drops some straight bars and all your criticism is no longer relevant. Oh my god, the final boss is so good. I don't give a shit if you find it easy. This final showdown is so cool and an amazing way to end off the game. The music is absolutely stellar, and I love the process of defeating the hands to get to the head. A hard final boss doesn't automatically mean it's good, and either way, this boss was still a decent challenge, and I'm really glad that they at least did the final boss justice. Which makes me question why it's here and not anywhere else, but whatever, we move on. And now it's time to talk about my least favorite part of the game, and ultimately what drags it down a bit on my score. And you can probably guess what I'm gonna say, because you probably find it as annoying as I do, and it's the fact that this game ends. If you thought I was going to say the talking flowers, you're stupid and live a sad life. The fun comes to a stop and the credits are rolling. As a longtime Mario fan who's been playing this since he was 5, it's like everything I could have asked for and more. And now that I've got that game, I don't know what to want next. And it's weird. The most cliche thing that people think about when they play this game is how it makes them feel like a kid again. And while I see what they mean, Wonder actually makes me feel like an adult. Like everything has come full circle and I have matured and grown from the person who first played Mario World 15 years ago. Just like how the 2D Mario series has matured from its very early days. And this product is an amalgamation of all those years spent. Just like Pikmin 4, it's pretty obvious where I'm gonna rank this game. It's number 1 on the series, no doubt, and on the glass, it's literally overflowing out of the cup. Sure, it has those flaws. What game doesn't? But if I were to explain just how good this game is in one sentence, it would be, if you own a Nintendo Switch and don't purchase this game, you are seriously making a huge mistake. Or you don't like 2D platformers, which is also fair, I guess. And after playing and reviewing every game, sorta, it's safe to say that there are no bad games in the series. All of them define a point in time for when they came out, and even the ones I endlessly trashed are still good, or at least harmless, and that's saying a lot. You gotta think, in almost 40 years, there would be a couple of missteps along the way, and it's so impressive how Mario has been able to present consistent quality unlike any other series, because he is Mr. Video Game himself, and with the most recent entry being one of his best games yet, I feel bad for whatever comes after because it has to meet an incredibly high bar. I hope you enjoyed me rambling about a fictional Italian plumber for an hour or so. This video has been a passion project for a while now, and I really hope it does well because I lost a lot of sleep over it, but have no regrets on making it. The carpal tunnel was not worth it though.